Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmadyasya yato Anvayaditaratascha Artheshu Abhigyaswarat Tene Brahmahridaya Adikavaye Muhyanti Yatsurayah Tejo Vari Mridam Yatha Vinimayo Yatratra Sargo Mrisha Dhamna Swena Sada Nirastakuhakam Satyam Param Dhimahi Nigamakalpataror Galitam Phalam Shukamukad Amritadrava Sanyutam Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam Muhuraho Rasika Bhuvi Bhavukaha. We now enter the 19th chapter of the 10th Skandha of Srimad Bhagavatam. So we saw that the demon Pralamba was slain by the mighty Balaram in the last chapter. So after this beautiful pastime and being glorified by the cowherd boys, they are all now continuing their play. And as they are playing, it is said that the cows, they started grazing, and while the boys were all playing, the cows strayed. They went tempted by green grass and they entered a dense forest. And moving within the deep forest, they entered a thicket and they were not to be found. So suddenly, the cowherd boys, headed by Krishna and Balaram, they noticed that they are not able to find the cows. They couldn't find any trace of them. And because the cows are their essence of livelihood, they start trying to find them by tracing their footprints. So, what is important to note here is the cows are so essential to the way of living of the residents of Vrindavan, and in fact, the cows are so essential to Vedic culture itself and so essential to humanity at large because the cows produce everything that is essential to live in a very natural way. The cows give us milk, which is the most healthy, next only to the milk of the mothers, and from the milk we get very nutritious products such as butter and curds and cheese and ghee and so on, and which are all very excellent products for one's health. They have the necessary animal protein without causing any harm to the animals, and the cows very products that it excretes are themselves so useful for human civilization. Those who do organic farming would vouch that the most natural fertilizer is actually the urine of the cow called gomutra. If gomutra, the urine of cow is sprayed, it acts as a natural fertilizer without need for any chemicals. And similarly, the cow dung is a great fuel. It results in great way to naturally generate energy. Therefore, the cow, in all the various ways, takes care of human civilization, and that is why the cow is considered central. And essentially, in fact, as people move to organic farming, we're recognizing the harm done by chemicals and fertilizers. It is all the more important to use the products of cow to have sustainable farming. So the Gopas, the cowherd boys headed by Krishna, therefore set the example by revering the cows. So they go in search of the cows and they trace the hoof prints, and by the hoof prints and by the marks of grass being cut by their teeth and so on, they are able to finally reach the cows, and Krishna calls them out. So Krishna calls each cow by the name, and as they enter the thick forest and Krishna calls out the name, all the cows come running to Krishna in the most beautiful, endearing way. It says, Ta ahuta bhagavata megha gambiraya gira swanamnam ninadam shutva prati nedu praharshita. Swanamnam, each one's name he called out, and listening to that, and he called out in the voice as deep as the voice of a cloud. Megha gambiraya, Krishna's voice. By now, Krishna is a big boy, and his voice sounds like that of a thick cloud, the voice of a rumbling of the cloud, that is. And with that deep voice, Krishna calls out the names of the cows, and they all come running with love. And at the same time, very surprisingly, as they are in the middle of the forest and all the cows reach them, and they are all in this forest, suddenly they find that there is a fearful flame that is engulfing on all sides. So we saw a forest fire that came when they were camping out on the night of after having subdued Kaliya. When they camped out in the forest, there was a forest fire and Krishna protected them. Now again, the same forest fire comes back, and this is only to reveal the greatness of Krishna to the Gopas and the cowherd boys, that is. So when the forest fire comes, again all the cowherd boys are all petrified, and they therefore call out to Krishna and Balaram. They say, Krishna Krishna Mahavira, He Rama, Amita Vikrama, Davagnina Dahyamanan, Prapannan Stratumarhataha. You have to protect us because you are our only savior. And now we see this forest fire. We came into this thick forest searching the cows. Now we have no easy way out, and we are covered on all four sides, and therefore we are having the suffering. Please take care of this. So immediately Krishna says, beautifully, he says, all of you don't be afraid and just shut your eyes right now, and I will take care. Krishna says, Vacho Nishamya Kripanan Bandhunam Bhagavan Harihi Nimaliyata Ma Bhaishta Lochanan Iti Abhashata. He says, close your eyes and do not be afraid. I'll take care. And they all close their eyes, and instantly Krishna swallows up the terrible fire and he rids them of all the danger. And not only that, when they open the eyes, they find that they are not in the forest anymore, but they are 10 miles away in the river banks in a very safe place. So perceiving this yogic power of Krishna, they recognize that he is no ordinary child. So slowly and surely, the cowherd boys, even though each time Krishna displays his yogic potency, they forget it, but they are starting to recognize that he is no ordinary being, and therefore their love for him only increases with reverence now. It says, Krishnasya yoga viryam tad yoga maya anubhavitam davagner atmana kshemam vikshate menire amaram. So they recognize that Krishna is not ordinary human, but he is immortal, Amar. So, and therefore they are very reverent, and at the same time they are also loving him as their dear friend. And this beautiful fusion of love with reverence takes their love to another level. And in this way, they are all coming back in the evening. It is said that Krishna, along with Balaram, after the exhausting day of first having killed Pralamba and then going into the thick forest searching the cows, finding the cows, and then having a forest conflagration and then putting it down, all these events. So every day of Krishna's pastimes is so beautifully eventful with so many pastimes. So they all go back in the evening, and Krishna plays flute and enjoys as if nothing has happened. It's a day in the office, as they say. Krishna, for him, it's everything is so casual. So it says here, Ga Sannivartya Sayakne Saharamo Janardanaha Venum Viranayan Goshtam Agad Gopair Abhishtutaha. So Saharamo, along with Rama, Balarama, Janardana, who is Krishna, Venum Viranayan, playing the Venu, the flute. In the evening time, they all went back, and all the Vrijavasis, they were all very happy to see Krishna. They were all very excited that Krishna came back, and especially the women of Vrija who are falling, the girls, that is the cowherd girls, the gopis, who are falling in love with Krishna. They are so much in feeling of separation whenever the day comes, because Krishna goes out of town with the boys, and so they are waiting for him to come back in the evening, and they are so happy. And it says here that it seems as if 100 yugas have passed for them. It says, Kshanam yugashatam iva yasam yena vina bhavat. For them, Govinda darshane kshanam yugashatam iva yasam yena vina bhavat. So, without him, it seems like one moment is like 100 epochs, 100 yugas. Because the gopis, for them, he is the supreme bliss. Gopinam Paramananda Asid Govinda Darshane. The Paramananda, the supreme bliss of the gopis, the cowherd girls, is to behold the charming face of Krishna, Govinda. And therefore, when Govinda is not there during the day, it seems to them like every moment is like 100 yugas. And so they are so ecstatic when he comes back. And then with this, Shuka Brahma Rishi concludes this 19th chapter. It's a short chapter again. And we move to the 20th chapter. So here, Shuka Brahma Rishi says, after they came back, the narration continues, and all the boys narrate to all the girls and the cowherd men and women the extraordinary events of that day, the destruction of the demon Pralamba and the forest fire, and how they were saved from it, and everybody was astonished to hear it. And even they, the cowherd men, women, and the girls, they are also recognizing them to be not ordinary humans, but the supreme being. It says, Menire Deva Pravarau Krishna Ramau Vrajam Gatau. So Krishna and Rama, that is Krishna and Balaram, were both starting to be seen by them as divine beings. They still have this notion of Krishna as their beloved, and yet they also have this feeling that he is something extraordinary, and therefore they have this beautiful feeling of reverence and love. And now the rainy season comes. So we were in the summer time. We saw that because of the heat of summer only, the boys and the cows had drunk the waters of Yamuna when it was made poisonous by Kaliya, and then Krishna, of course, saved them all and drove Kaliya out, and we again saw forest fire due to the summer heat and so on. But now summer is over and the rainy season comes. And here we see the poetry of Shuka Brahma Rishi. We will now see a set of verses where Shuka Brahma Rishi simply describes the rainy season, and the way he describes the rainy season in every verse with the similes he uses shows the greatness of Bhagavatam. It is both so naturally evocative and yet gives the highest similes, which brings forth self-knowledge in every example. So he says the rainy season began, which is conducive to the growth of all creatures, because everything comes to life, from grass to plants to trees, everything comes to life, animals come out, everything is coming to life. And there is bright circles around the sun and the moon. That is, sun and moon are covered by clouds, and they are simply seen through the clouds, and there is thundering skies. And it is said, now he goes on, every verse now will have a beautiful simile. He says, dense and dark clouds accompanied by lightning and thunder is rendering all the luminaries obscure. That is, the luminaries of the sky, the stars, the moon, and the sun, are all rendered obscure because of dense and dark clouds, thunder and lightning. And he says this is same as how Brahman, the pure being, the Paramatma, is obscured by three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. So Sattva he compares with lightning, because Sattva is goodness, which is light. And Rajas he compares with thunder, because Rajas is activity with passion. And Tamas he compares with cloud, because cloud is dark and dull, overcast, and that is why people feel depressed when it's overcast. And so he compares that with tamas, dullness. So Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas he compares with lightning, thunder, and clouds. And just as how the sun and the moon are covered by the clouds, thunder, and lightning, similarly, they say the example Shuka Brahma Rishi gives us, it is just as how pure self, the supreme being within, the Paramatma, is covered by Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. And then he goes on, he says, when the time of monsoon came, the sun started to release the wealth that it had taken away. So the sun has absorbed all the moisture away from earth and packed it into clouds, and during the monsoon time it releases it back on earth. And he says this is same as how the right king would extract taxes and release it at the right time. So that is the job of the king. The government is to extract taxes as necessary from the right people who can afford it, and then release it back as wealth onto the right deserving people. So he gives that as an example for sun drawing water out of earth and then releasing it during monsoon. He says huge clouds which are endowed with lightning, and they are also having winds that's pouring down water, is same as how the compassionate ones, when they observe the misery and the suffering of the people of the world, they give their very life, they give their wisdom, they give everything they have to them. So just as the compassionate wise beings release their wisdom out of love, similarly the clouds are releasing the water out of love for earth. And he goes on to say, the earth, which was shrunk through summer heat, so everything had shrunk because of the heat, and now it's starting to grow back again when drenched by the rain. And this is same as how somebody who is engaged in austerities for a selfish end, If someone is doing some tapas for a selfish end and because of that he is fasting, after the end of the fast he starts overeating and he becomes again fat again. Similarly, Shukra Brahma Rishi says the earth was dried up during summer and now it's again becoming fat. He says beautifully, Yathaiva Kamyata Pasastanuhu Samprapya Tatpalam. After attaining the fruit of his tapas, he starts gaining his weight again, which he lost during fasting. Then he goes on to say, every verse we can see the poetic beauty as well as the wisdom that is packed in each comparison, in each simile. He says, because of the cloud cover, one cannot see the moon, one cannot see the planets, but the only light we could see is the fireflies that are flying around in darkness. And he says this is same as how in the age of Kali, that is in the current age of conflict, the true wisdom of Vedas are clouded and false speculative wisdom is only seen. He says, Yata papena pakanda nahi veda kalau yuge. In this age of Kali, the Vedic highest philosophy, the supreme truth is obscured and various partial fragmental philosophies are taking root. And he says that is exactly as how the sun and the moon are covered and fireflies, which are simply twinkling, are seen as light. Then he says frogs that have been silent all along during summer, now they are all coming back to life and starting to croak loudly. And he says this is similar to how Brahmana boys who during the day remain silent and learn the Vedas, and in the evening when they are asked to chant, they all start chanting loudly. So he beautifully compares that to the frogs remaining silent during summer and start croaking during the rains. Then he goes on, every simile is so poetic, one can see the beauty and the joy of just going through each example with both the natural beauty it evokes and the wisdom it contains. He says streams that were drying before are now overflowing, and but they are, because they are overflowing, they are going in all kinds of directions. And he says this is similar to how one who suddenly gets wealth, he has no self control and he is spending money in all kinds of sense pleasures in all kinds of directions. Then he says the earth looks in different colors. The grass is looking green, the meadows are green, the insects are red in color that are flying all over, and there is white colored mushrooms along the grass. So this is like an army of kings, how an army has different colored uniforms which are all marching together, and that way there is green, there is red, there is white, all kinds of colors adorning earth. And he says the fields are filled with crop now, and it is so beautifully becoming rich in abundance by the will of providence. And it says, he says here, all the inhabitants of both land and water are now looking beautiful because of the fresh rainwater, just as devotees attain a beautiful form through worshipping Bhagavan. He says very nicely, he says, Abhibhrad Ruchiram Rupam Yata Hari Nishevaya. By worshipping the Supreme Being Hari, just as everyone becomes beautiful, just because of the inner beauty, their outer beauty shines. Similarly, he says the earth is also shining. All the inhabitants of land and water are also looking beautiful because of consuming the rainwater, fresh water, just as people who take in true devotion start looking beautiful. The oceans, on the other hand, now they are getting all the waves because of the rains. The rivers are overflowing and they are flooding the oceans, and the oceans already have a lot of waves, and so they are looking very turbulent. And he says this is same as how an immature yogi gets agitated upon seeing sense objects. He says apakwa yoginaschitam kamaktam gunayugyata. Apakwa yogin means the one who is an immature yogi. Chittam, his consciousness, kamaktam gunayugyata. When he is contacted with sense objects, he falls down. So similarly, and therefore his mind is very turbulent. Similarly, he says the oceans are turbulent. On the other hand, mountains are unperturbed. The same rain that falls on rivers, causing them to overflow and the oceans to be turbulent, they have no impact on the mountains. The mountains, they receive the rain, but they don't feel the least agitated. And he says that is as how one completely surrendered to the Supreme Being who's beyond all sense objects is completely unaffected by any sense objects or any calamities. He says, Abhibhuyamana Vyasanair yata adhokshaja chetasaha. Adhokshaja means the one who is beyond all sense objects. That is the name of Krishna, the Supreme Being. So one whose consciousness is completely abiding in the Supreme Being, he on the other hand is like a mountain, because the mountain is unaffected by the rainwater falling. No matter how much rainwater falls, the mountain is not agitated, whereas the ocean is agitated. So that's how he compares ocean to an immature yogi and the mountain to a composed jnani who is a completely surrendered being. Then he says, the tracks in the forest land, there are many tracks that people walk during summer, and all these tracks now are overgrown with grass, and therefore they are not seen. Nobody is treading on them, and because of that they becomes hidden. And he says this is same as how the Vedic texts, when they are not continuously chanted, they become they become consigned to oblivion. So when Vedic texts, when the scriptures, when the wisdom of the scriptures are not so it can be read in two ways. One is the recitation of Vedas. If the Vedas are not recited regularly, then the Vedas get lost, because Vedas are traditionally never written down. It's passed orally from the guru to disciple, and therefore if the chanting is not going on, then the oral tradition is lost. The other way to read it is also that if one doesn't abide by the wisdom of Vedas, the true wisdom of self-knowledge, then it is lost. Even if one has read it at one time, it is lost. So he says, this is similar to how the tracks that were formed in the forest that people were treading upon is lost because of the rains. Then he says, there is lightning coming once in a while to the clouds, but they are not constant, they are just flashing once in a while. And he says very colorfully, interestingly, he says it is like how men who are engaged in sadhana, every once in a while they are affected by thoughts of lustful women. So, and it can be the other way around too. So he says, just as lightnings come occasionally and disturb the sky, it is similar to how the one who is engaged in sadhana, the one of virtue, is occasionally perturbed by thoughts of lust. Then he goes on, he says, the rainbow, the beautiful Indra Dhanush as it is called, the Indra Dhanush is seen, but there is no string. As we can see, the rainbow comes, the bow is there, but there is no string that connects the bow. And so he says the rainbow without the string is similar to how the three gunas are seen, but the Brahman underlying it is not seen. So that which ties the three gunas, sattva, rajas and tamas together, is the pure being, the supreme spirit, pure consciousness. And that is hidden, only the three gunas are seen. He says that is similar to how the bow is seen, but the string is not seen. Then he says, the clouds are illumined by the effulgence of the moon, but the moon itself is not seen, similar to how the jiva, he is obscured by the ego sense, which is his own light. So it's such a beautiful simile. When we see the moon through the clouds, we see the cloud because of the light of the moon. There is no other light, and same can be said of the sun too. When we see sun covered by clouds, the clouds are seen because of the sun. There is no other light by which one can see the clouds, and yet the very light by which the clouds are seen is what is obstructing the sun. So similarly, he says, the ego sense is coming forth only from pure consciousness, and yet the very ego sense that comes forth from pure consciousness hides pure consciousness. So such a perfect metaphor he has given. Shuka Brahma Rishi, so he is called as, in the very second skandha, he is called as Vyasaki Rishi Kavi. So he is a Rishi, he is a sage, and he is also a Kavi, a great poet. Vyasaki, who is the son of Vyasa, Shuka Brahman. So we see the quality of the sage and the poet streaming forth in these verses, where every verse is full of sagely wisdom and poetic beauty. And this particular verse is so lovely, how the cloud which is seen through the light of the sun or the moon, and yet it obstructs the very sun or the very moon whose light is what we use to see it. Similarly, the ego sense, I sense, mine, the I thought comes forth from pure consciousness, and yet that very I thought obstructs pure consciousness. Then he goes on, he says, looking at the appearance of the clouds, the peacocks are all rejoicing, just as householders who are agonized normally, they are rejoiced on seeing the devotees of Krishna. So he says, Griheshu tapta nirvinna yata achyuta janagame. When the devotees of Achyuta, Krishna, come home, the householders are truly in joy. They are able to forget their day to day suffering and they are able to soak in the bliss of devotion. And in that way, peacocks are happy seeing the clouds. He says the water that has been sucked from the trees that had shrunk because of the summer heat are now generating beautiful forms. So earlier, all the plants and trees and everything had their water sucked out and they were looking dull. And now the same water is coming back, pouring on them and making them blossom. This is same as how ascetics who are fatigued through austerities again grow robust when their austerities are completed. Then he talks about cranes, how cranes, they live in lakes. The lakes are full of, there is a lot of water now, but there are also a lot of thorns. And still the cranes continue to live there. And he says this is same as how householders continue to live in places which are full of distractions due to the company of other men who are not interested in self-realization. He says, Griheshu ashanta krityeshu gramya iva durashayah. People continue to live in places which is filled with others who are like thorns and thereby obstruct self-realization, obstruct devotion. And this is the same way the cranes continue to live in water even though it's full of thorns. Then he goes on to say, Indra pours down showers, and because of that, all the dams are breached, just as the path of the Vedas are destroyed by the various speculative theories of heretics. So, the path of Vedanta is very simple and clear. It's so straightforward what Bhagavatam puts out, what Bhagavad Gita puts out, that there is only one Supreme Self and everything is coming forth from the Supreme Self through the material energy of this pure consciousness. So it is a very simple, direct self knowledge which results in freedom, fearlessness, and unconditional love. And yet, this is breached by various false theories of so many speculative heretical theories, and that is the example given here of how various dams are breached because of the rains. And then finally, he says, because of the winds, the clouds are pouring down water. So the clouds are full of water, but it's winds that make them pour the water down. It is same as how the kings who have all the wealth, but they are directed by the sagely brahmanas to give the wealth out. So again, every metaphor is so perfect. We cannot have a better metaphor than this in each verse. He says, just as the wealth that is there with the kings, with the government, has to be given out to the right people, and it is given out on the instigation of wise counsel of sagely brahmanas. So this is similar to how winds make the cloud which is full of water to pour out the wind. So in this way, the rainy season is beautifully described by Shuka Brahma Rishi, and after that, it's now describing how Krishna and Balaram had the most joyful time in this rainy season. It is said that they would enter the forest deep, and the forest is full of dates and apples and so on, and they would sport there. They would have a wonderful time. It says, Evam vanam tad varshishtam pakva karjura jambumat go gopalair vritau rantum sabalach pravishud harihi. Hari, along with Balarama, would enter this forest and full of completely ripened fruits. They would enjoy this. The cows are full of milk in their udders, and they would march in quick steps. The Lord would enter the forest and they would rejoice with all the trees that are dripping with honey, the streams which are full of water, and the caves that are looking so ravishing. At times, it says Krishna would take shelter in the caves and they would just eat the roots, the bulbs, and the fruits there. He says, Kvachid vanaspati krode guhayam cha abhivarshati nirvishya bhagavan reme kandamula phalashana. He would eat bulbs, fruits, and roots, and he would be in this caves. And not only that, they would take, very beautifully it says, they take curd rice. So curd rice, it seems, is very prominently eaten by Krishna, and this is in fact the most favorite dish in South India, and it's very nice to see Shuka Brahma Rishi specifically referred to that. He says, Dadyodhanam samanitam shilayam salilantike sambojaniyair bhubuje gopai sankarshananvitah. Along with Sankarshana Balarama, Krishna would go and he would eat Dadyodhanam. Dadyodhanam means, Dadhi means curd, Dadyodhanam means curd rice. So he would eat curd rice and along with all the roots and bulbs and fruits and so on in the forest. And the cows are all full of milk and they are all enjoying and they are sitting with their eyes closed and ruminating. Everybody is enjoying the splendor of the rainy season, and in this way, Krishna, along with Balarama, enjoys the rainy season. And then now comes the most beautiful autumn season, and this is also described so wonderfully by Shuka Brahma Rishi. He says the autumn season, which is so clear, free of clouds, and the waters are all clear, now comes forth. He says, Evam nivasato tasmin Rama Keshavayor Vrije Sharat Samabhavat Vyabhra Swachamba Parushanila. So Rama Keshava means Balaram and Keshava, Krishna, as they are enjoying in Vraja, the autumn comes, which is now the next season after monsoon. So now the clouds have all cleared, the waters are all clear. So during monsoon, because of the rains, the rivers are all full of various particles, woods falling from forests and leaves, and it's generally not very clear. The monsoon, the water level goes up, but the water is not clear. But when the autumn comes, all that muck is taken out, it goes into the ocean, and the water becomes super clear. And that is why autumn is the best season to go to Ganga and to have a bath, because the temperature is perfect and the water is so clear. There is a lot of water and yet the water is also clear. So that is why it's describing here. And because of the water, the lotuses are all becoming so beautiful. The water is so clear. And again, Shuka Brahma Rishi continues in this poetic vein. He says, it is just as how those who had fallen down from the path of yoga, they recover their purity once they get back to true yoga. It says, Brashtanamiva chetamsi punar yoga nishevaya. One who is yoga brashta, that is one who has fallen down from yoga, but he recovers it when he comes back to the way of true yoga. He recovers the purity, and in this way the waters, the rivers have gained the purity again. The autumn drives away the clouds from the sky, just as devotion to Krishna drives away evil. Again, every verse, now we will see a set of verses describing autumn. Similar to monsoon, the rainy season, the autumn is described in each verse with the poetic and sagely wisdom. He says, Sharancha Harashraminam Krishne Bhakti Yatha Shubham. So Krishna's bhakti, just as it drives away, the devotion to Krishna drives away all evil. Similarly, the autumn drove away all the clouds in the sky, and the sky is clear. And the sky is now clear. Having discharged all the water, the sky is so clear now, similar to how the ascetic who has given up all desires looks very clear. He says, Yata tyaktaishana shanta munayo mukti kilbishaha. The one who is full of desires, once he gives up all the desires, his mind is so clear. He says that is how the sky, which was full of clouds and water, has given up all the water and now looks very clear. And then it says the mountains now are full of water because of the monsoon. And in some places they release the water through streams and through various ways. There is different cascades forming and streams forming, and in some places they do not release the water. He says this is same as how the pure jnanis, they release wisdom only to the right people. They don't release it indiscriminately, but only to the right people. He says, Yatha jnanamritam kale jnanino dadate nava. They give it to the right people and not to everyone indiscriminately. Similarly, the mountains are releasing water only in some places. And all the creatures who are living in shallow waters, they are not noticing the water diminishing. So after monsoon ends and the sun comes out and autumn makes the water levels go down, but some of the aquatic creatures, they don't realize the water is going down. And he says this is same as how ignorant people do not perceive their lifespan shortening every day. So very nicely he says the lifespan goes down every day. Yatha ayur anvaham kshayam nara muda kutumbinah. One who is caught in attachment to family doesn't notice that his lifetime is ebbing away each day. Just like this, the aquatic creatures are not noticing the water level going down after monsoon. And just as a helpless householder who is attached to the senses is not able to overcome hardships and is suffering, similarly, the creatures who are thus living in shallow waters are suffering the heat of the sun that has come back. He says, Yatha daridraha kripanaha kutumba vijitendriyaha. The one who is caught in the household attachment, he cannot subdue the senses and he is suffering. And in this way, these aquatic creatures who are ignorant, who don't recognize water level is going down, they are starting to suffer because the sun is now again getting hot. And he says the land that is given up all the moisture and the plants that had become very wet, they are also giving up all their wetness. So the land that was so wet and moist, the plants that were so wet are all becoming now free of that extra moisture. And he says this is same as how the wise slowly give up the sense of identification to I and mine. He says yata aham mamatam dhira sharirādishu anatmasu. Just as the wise give up attachment to the body and attachment to that which is all not pure self as I and mine, so this false attachment, how they give up slowly. Similarly, the earth and the plants are giving up the extra moisture away. And on the advent of autumn, the ocean becomes quiet, just as an ascetic becomes quiet and stops reciting the Vedas. So the Vedas are chanted to awaken self knowledge. That is the purpose of Vedas. And one who is simply mechanically chanting Vedas is not recognizing the true fruit of it. And one who recognizes the true fruit as self knowledge, he stops chanting the Vedas. And therefore, here the example is given that just as the ocean that was turbulent during monsoon now becomes quiet in the autumn, similarly, the one who was chanting the Vedas, now with self knowledge, he keeps quiet. And all the dams that are now built are making sure the waters are going out of the fields properly, just as the one practicing yoga makes the wisdom flow out properly. So, in this way, he goes on to describe every aspect of monsoon through the metaphors coming from the highest wisdom. He says the moon removes the suffering of the sun, just as wisdom puts an end to suffering of one's identification with the body. So in the autumn, the sun is again becoming hot, and therefore the days are again becoming hot, having gotten used to the monsoon cool days. When the This is very unique to Bharat, where there is a second summer, as it were, because autumn, when it comes, it's again quite sunny. Before winter comes, between monsoon and winter, there is autumn, where the sun is again bright and again it feels hot. And so here he says, then people welcome moon. That is why the full moon of autumn is the most celebrated time, Sharad Purnima. And we will see the glory of that particular full moon very soon. But here he says the moon alleviates the suffering of the autumn sun, just as wise men, wisdom puts an end to suffering, or more particularly, he says, just as Mukunda, Krishna, relieves the agony of the women who are attached to him. Very beautiful verse here. Again, he says, the verse here is, Dehabhimanajam bodho mukundo brajayoshita. So, two examples he gives. The one who is attached to the body, he is relieved through bodha, wisdom. And the one who is so beloved of Krishna, Mukunda, she is relieved through seeing Krishna. So with the gopis, the cowherd girls who are holding Krishna as their life, especially the cowherd girls who see him as their beloved, as their consort, and in complete love with him, For them, seeing him relieves their suffering. And he says that is the example of how the moon comes and relieves the suffering of the hot sun, is similar to seeing the beautiful face of Krishna that relieves the suffering of the gopis. And the sky without any clouds in the night. So now with autumn, the skies are clear, there is no cloud, and therefore the clear sky in the night with stars twinkling brightly. So we saw earlier how only fireflies were seen in the summer, in the monsoon time, with the clouds covering the moon and the stars. But now the sky is clear, the stars are twinkling brightly, and he says this is similar to how the one who is situated in sattva, in purity, he is able to truly reflect the essence of the Vedic wisdom. So, just as the skies are clearly showing the light of the stars, the ones whose mind is abiding in purity reflects the light of Vedic wisdom. The full moon shining in the sky, surrounded by stars, is exactly same as how Krishna is surrounded by all the men of boys and girls of Vraja. He says, Yata Yadupati Krishno Vrishni Chakra Vrito Bhuvi. Just as Yadupati, who is Krishna, surrounding him, all the cowherd boys and girls are always situated. Similarly, the full moon is surrounded by stars, and the beautiful breeze that is flowing, that is blowing, and that is relieving the heat of the autumn. It is similar to how people are also feeling the joy by just tasting the wisdom. But then he says also the only ones whose suffering is not alleviated is the cowherd women, because they have such feeling of separation due to their mind being captivated by Krishna. He says, Janastapam Juhur Gopyo na Krishna Hata Chetasaha. People in general are very relieved by seeing the beautiful breeze, feeling the breeze in the evening. But the only ones who are suffering more because of the breeze are the gopis. So, very beautiful way we can see how the pangs of total surrender and loving devotion to Krishna in the hearts of the gopis, in the hearts of the cowherd girls who are full of love for Krishna, seeing him as their beloved, wanting him as their husband, loving him with all their heart. Their agony is only increased when the full moon is shining and when the breeze is blowing, because their agony of separation from Krishna is increased because they only want to be with him. And this agony of separation will be at such a peak before we see the beautiful pastime of Krishna with the gopis that comes soon. So now we only see this agony of separation felt by the gopis on the full moon nights in the autumn with the breeze blowing. That is only increasing the agony of love for Krishna and the separation that is causing them distress. So, in this way, autumn season is in full flow, and it is said that all the females, autumn season is considered the right time for mating. So, it is said the cows, the she deers, the female birds, and the women are all under the influence of autumn conceiving because of the season. And in the morning time all the flowers come out. It is said except water lilies all the flowers bloom in the morning on sunrise. And again he says, just as everyone except the thieves are rendered fearless under a good king. Every metaphor is both at the level of self knowledge and at the level of also how a kingdom has to be run, gives such beautiful examples. So here he says, when there is a good king ruling, everyone rejoices except the thieves. So similarly, he says, when the sun comes out, all the flowers bloom except the water lilies. And in this way, the earth is enriched with ripe corns and all the beautiful fruits, and the rainy season is over, and the land is bountiful, and there are grand festivals, and every festival is celebrating, and especially because of Krishna and Balaram being there, everybody is so happy and celebrating. So, this is why autumn is the most celebrated time in Vedic culture. Navaratri comes, Diwali comes, and various pujas come, because autumn is the time when the monsoon has ended, when people don't normally travel much because of the rains, And once the rains stop and the skies are clear, it is full of festivals, the 9-day festival of Navaratri, Dashera, Diwali, all the beautiful festivals, Utsavas. That's why it says Utsava, Mahotsavai. He says the great festivals happen in autumn and everybody is celebrating. And he ends this description of autumn by saying that everybody is now moving about. They have been detained by the rains. All the kings, the students, the recluses, the merchants, everybody who's detained because of the rain. The rain doesn't allow much travel. So many people, that's why, keep what's called Chaturmasya. They stay in the same place during the rain for about 4 months. And once the rain stops, they start moving about. And so here also he gives a beautiful simile. He says it is same as how the yogis who learned all the mantras and who have become completely adept in yoga, they were waiting for the span of life to get over so that they can be completely free of bodily conception. So once one attains self knowledge, there is said to be no next life, and therefore he simply lives out the karma that is meant to be exhausted in this last life, and then after that he leaves the body to be eternally free. And so in this way, the example is given that just as everyone was blocked by the rains, and now when the rains have stopped, they have freely moved out. Similarly, is similar to how the yogis, having realized the truth, were simply blocked because of the rest of their lifespan, and once that's over, they were free. Of course, this is only at one level, because in reality, there is nothing other than Bhagavan. That is what Bhagavatam always instructs us, and therefore, the Jivan Mukta, the one who realizes the truth here and now, he doesn't bother whether the body is alive or dead. The only thing he cares about is to always be in eternal surrender to Bhagavan. So that is why all the great beings have never asked for liberation, even never asked for freedom from rebirth, but only to be ever surrendered in the sweet mode of loving devotion. So, in this way, with all these beautiful similes for both rainy season and autumn season, each one with such poetic beauty and sagely wisdom, Shuka Brahma Rishi concludes this chapter. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.